Hey, friends. So today we're going to just cover a few things. Not a super long episode, probably, but we want to cover things like collecting seeds, foraging, drying techniques, things that we're doing to kind of do the squirrely things this season that squirrels are doing. And I feel like a squirrel constantly. Every time I go out the door, I'm like, oh, I'm such a squirrel. Because I will, too, go from one thing to the other thing. And Drew yesterday was like, so what's on the agenda today? I was like, I'm going to just go outside and see where it leads me. Because
And then I went outside, came back in, and she was making a quilt in the basement with Eliza.
Well, so, when your 12-year-old says, Mom, I want to make a quilt, you don't say, hold on a sec. I'm going to, I had to help her.
I like to think of it more as you're chasing squirrels than...
yes. If it was up to me and on my schedule all the time, then, but what happened is she cleaned her room and she found this supply kit for making a quilt and was inspired. And so I wanted to reward her for having cleaned her room and B, encourage her to do something other than, make a mess of her room or do whatever other thing that she was doing that was, not.
And it's the cutest thing in the world. I mean, she's really working hard on it. I'm very excited about it.
But I made a few posts about things that I'm harvesting right now. And we went foraging last week with the kids, which I'll tell you was really gratifying. And, I think the reason that it was gratifying for me was that the reason that we started homeschooling was that, that was why we started homeschooling, was so that we could learn side by side with the kids and so that we could go on these little adventures and that we could be outside and we could just get to know creation better as a whole. Now, I'm not going to say that they were all in. They were not all in.
There were a lot of moments where they were all in.
Well, it's interesting because the morning was, okay, we're going to go and we're going to forage and we're not going to sit and do schoolwork this morning. We're going to get outside and grab baskets. And everybody was very eager to jump in the car.
Yeah.
So it's like, the mixing up of things and routines they enjoyed. However, and I think they complain at this point a little bit because they're teenagers and they feel obligated to complain.
Yeah. I felt like the general attitude was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
And and they were all...
We had on one of the children come down pretty hard in a disciplinary fashion the night before.
Right.
So I think she was really putting her best foot forward.
She was treading lightly.
Yeah, she was definitely... not complaining maybe nearly as much as she wanted to. I will say it was like
a parenting moment where we chose mercy over. It could have gone either way, and it just felt like, yeah. So I think she was appreciative of that.
Yeah.
And knew that she probably deserved worse.
Right, and foraging wasn't really a punishment, if you think about it.
Now, it was at the shuv, which is its own punishment because it's like blackberries, and, you've heard about the shuv. So it's
the walking is not exactly...
Yeah.
But we had to move cows. So we moved cows. We did that work together.
Yeah.
Running lines, that kind of thing. But then Drew had seen several persimmons and some pecans. And so we're like, well, let's go out there. Let's see if we can gather anything. And we had, I would say, great success. We took out empty containers. And I learned so many lessons, I think. Like, I'm always sort of looking for the spiritual side of things when it comes to when we go foraging or when I go in the garden in general, or, how things play out without my making it happen. And in this particular situation, I did post about this, but just that feeling of going out with empty buckets and not knowing what you're going to find, but being open and ready to receive, right? Like, that is a really good feeling. And I think as homesteaders, we tend to approach it more with the planting the seeds and then, I don't know how to describe it. It's like the opposite approach of if I do enough, I'll get enough kind of thing. And
releasing the control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really the biggest lesson I've learned from our homestead in general is just being open and willing and waiting to see what comes next. Because you can put all the seeds in the ground and it can fail. You just don't know what's going to happen. And actually a really good example of this within this context of this actual experience is we have plugged a lot of mushrooms into logs.
Right. Yeah.
So many mushroom logs. and not a lot to show for it. In fact, I would say we've gathered maybe 2 or 3 mushrooms from all of those efforts. I think we have some
mushroom flavored squirrels on our property.
Potentially. Yeah. We just don't, I don't know, we probably didn't give it enough time, enough energy, enough rain, enough watering, enough attention generally. But I think the appeal of mushroom walks is fix it and forget it. And that has not been our experience. It's been a fix it and you'll see where the squirrels have eaten them is what we've noticed. But anyway, I'd plugged maybe 5 logs with reishi a couple of years ago and not gotten anything from that. And then we're out, we've collected all these persimmons, we collected all these pecans, which we were expecting a little bit when we went out. And then Drew turns a corner that he was kind of cutting through and he's like, oh, what kind of mushroom is that? Is that a reishi? And I came around the corner, I was like, oh, it was a reishi. And, you could see it on one side. And then he's like, oh, look at this side. And then it was everywhere. The whole stump.
Big stump.
Big stump was completely covered with reishi mushrooms. So it was just like, I think the lesson for me in that was, and I didn't mean to go down this path, but the lesson was just like, a lot of times I think we put in the effort in one place and it pays off in a different place. And I think that just the lesson is to show up. I'm going to cry just thinking about it, because how many times do you do something and you don't get the result that you expect to get, or you don't get paid the way you want to get paid? But I do think there is this give and take. And, the Lord knew I wanted 6 logs worth of reishi. He said, well, it's cute that you put those there, but you're going to find them over here.
Yeah. And years later, that's an interesting part is for me, with the foraging is I think you said a lot about I knew there was a persimmon tree. I knew there was a pecan tree. And just being aware of your surroundings and almost having I feel like it's a little cliche, but I'll say it. A childlike mentality of we're walking around out there with Abraham and he's poking and looking at everything. And a lot of times I'm just kind of trudge ahead. But if you slow down even more and kind of especially when you're foraging and it's just you're you need to release the expectation of what you're going to find. And then you find things that you didn't even expect to
Your
find
eyes
out
can
there.
be open.
Yeah. I think we probably could have foraged even more things. I know we chewed on some juniper berries because that's just kind of always fun, but we could have foraged those also.
Well, and I was regretting not having actually harvested some of the goldenrod, the solidago that was out there.
There's just a ton of that.
You kind of, your buckets are full and you're like, okay, I got to take these full buckets home. Yeah. And I think it's funny. I thought you were going to say not the childlike part, but an abundance mindset. That's what I thought you were going to say, which isn't it interesting? If a kid untethered by society, a wild and free kid would go out with wonder and look at everything and explore and be like, what's this? What's this? What's this? And, we're so single-minded and we get so focused on the one thing that we want to get done. And maybe isn't that what abundance is not being so single-minded. And I don't think there's anything wrong with focus necessarily. Cause I think, we've kind of gone through the business, the one thing attitude, right? And, I guess for me, the one thing sounded good in theory, but I have struggled with it because I don't feel like I have one thing. I feel like I'm a mom and I love that. And I have some business stuff going on and I love that. And I'm obsessed with plants and I love that. And, there's I think humans can be multidimensional and I think we can pick and harvest in all these different areas all at the same time.
Well, I think there's kind of intentions too, though. Every time I go out to move the cows, I don't have the opportunity, or I'm not prioritizing the opportunity to forage the 40 acres. Right. Sometimes I need to go out there and just move the cows and do other things for the day. So having that focus is important because if I start collecting mushrooms and everything else, I could be out there all day.
Well, and I guess when I think about food, it's such a funny thing because, with foraging, I feel like I'm still very new at it. And I don't have a ton of confidence because I know there's way more out there for us to eat than we are aware of.
Yeah.
And that we've become very, carrot situation where, you know, big industry, big farms are like waving this carrot in front of our faces and saying, this is where you get that at this grocery store over here. Because they can't harvest Jerusalem artichokes and sell them in great quantities at the grocery store. They can't, you know, harvest, you know, even reishi necessarily, or like some of the things that you find and aren't shelf stable, pawpaws and persimmons. Like these are things that cattails you have to do yourself. And they have all this deep nutrition and potentially more than we need. But we think we need to go to the grocery store to get the things that we need because they make us feel like that's where all the food is. But if we walk around and we really know our environment, or if we stop scalping our environments, you know, and we let the diversity come back, just how much is there? Anyway, this has really gone off on some kind of a philosophical thing.
This was not your
rant.
This wasn't your plan?
It was not my plan.
Yeah. But well, I will say, so like back to foraging, the other thing was we were up in Sparta and we found spice bush, which we knew was there this summer, but it had a bunch on it when we were there a couple of months ago, or a month ago. And so we harvested those for the first time, which those are like incredible, super exciting and makes me want to plant more. I know the one thing is they're an understory plant, so you can plant them like in your woods if, you know, if you have a lot of forest and don't want to log it.
Some other things too that we've planted and are actually doing well this year is beauty bush did well. Beauty berry. And I harvested and made jam out of that yesterday. Yopon. Both of these things can grow in the shade in the woods. So it's just exciting to have some things kind of that we did put effort in. We've planted so much because, you know, we've planted the hazelnuts. If you haven't heard the hazelnuts, we got about 25 hazelnuts this year
like
from
that's
25
a huge
bushes.
Win because we've never gotten hazelnuts before.
Yeah. I have no comment. And then, you know, the blueberries. And I think what we've learned in large part is that we didn't plan super well for those plants. And so the blueberries just kept being eaten. This year we've had more raspberries than we've ever had before on the same bush we've had for 10 years. So it's just these deer.
I was just eating raspberries today.
Or you. Yeah. It's lovely.
It's really nice because the raspberry bush is planted kind of like right outside the shed. So
it's like a treat.
My treat every time I go to the shed is have a few raspberries.
You made the lawnmower work again?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Here you go. Raspberries.
But yeah, so I think, you know, we learned a lot about how to plant, where to plant, all of that we've had some things kind of coming to fruition, literally. And that's been really nice. In also the finding the things just out there kind of ready, waiting for us to be open to receive is huge. So just a list kind of breaking down. We said persimmons, pecans. We found the reishi. We found some oysters the other day. There's lots of turkey tail out. I've seen people posting like crazy. I haven't found any myself, but lion's mane. What else have I seen people gathering, or what have we gathered? I have harvested a lot of solidago. And then a lot of things from the garden, like the herbs, especially. It's a good time to start picking them and bringing them into dry. So I brought in tulsi and shiso and lots of different things that we've been drying. And
prickly pear.
Prickly pears we picked yesterday. Yeah, the tunas, not the flat parts of pads.
Flatness. But so we're gonna probably make prickly pear wine from that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I've made syrup in the past, which was fun.
Yeah,
I just made the beautyberry jelly, so I feel like we're set on jelly for a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, so how we're harvesting it, you know, it's pretty straightforward. You cut most of these things, you bring them inside, and then you find an appropriate way to dry them. So for most of the herbs, I hang them upside down and let them hang for a while. You don't want to let them hang for super long. They'll get lots of cobwebs and stuff on them. Not that I haven't done that. I have done that. Sometimes they're just pretty, so I leave them there. But letting them hang to dry is a really efficient way to let them dry really quickly. And then you want to break them down into smaller packages, air safe, humid safe packaging. And then we've got this, what do we call that thing?
It's like a air dehydrating rack.
Right. So it can be tricky in North Carolina to air dry things because the humidity levels, but we're out of the humidity season. So it's okay.
Hanging inside.
And it's hanging inside. in a corner in the shade, like out of a window. And so right now our living room really smells like fungal activity, because the reishi has a very pungent smell while it's dehydrating. So it's
which I like to believe, like breathing it in is beneficial too.
It's like bringing the earth inside.
Hopefully. But it's kind of a cool drying rack because it has like all these like different layers, and each is screened, and each layer zips closed, so you don't have to worry about like mice getting into it. Yeah.
So in that rack right now, we've got hops. What did I put in there yesterday?
Some hibiscus. Put a ton of those Thai dragon peppers in there.
Oh yeah, those things are deadly. A couple of layers of reishi. And I think there's something else in there too.
But the pecans are in there.
The pecans are in there. Yeah. So all of those things need to cure or dry, dehydrate.
And I would say, like, to me, like that list sounds like a little bit overwhelming if you've never foraged before. But really, it's like anything else. It's like small steps. Like learn one plant, take your plant identifying app out there and say, oh, what's this plant? Can I harvest this or can I not? You know, like what's its benefits? And learn that one and then do it again. And, you know, over the years, you learn it. Don't like put all this pressure of like, I need to identify all this right away. I would say like one thing is just being able to identify persimmon bark of the tree. Like when you're walking through the woods, it's a very distinct bark. But a lot of times, like if you don't know what it looks like, the persimmons are above your head.
You
might not even know they're there. But like if you see the bark now, like when I'm walking through the woods, I'll stop and I'll be like, oh, okay, let me look around the ground. And like, sure enough, there's persimmons. So, you know, learning that, same with pecans or all the
Well, and it's
things.
interesting too. I think we try to learn in this really one like specific way. I'm going to read all about persimmons, right? Or read all about pecans or read all about reishi. But the fullness of the experience of seeing them, finding them, cutting them off or harvesting them, looking around the tree, and all of that full, 4D, I guess, experience is like, that is how I learn. So, I could have looked at pictures of pecans all day long, but if I'd shown up out there, I probably would have been like, but then Drew's like, there's one. And then you start to say, oh, okay, I can see the similarities between these trees and start to understand their character and what to look for and to find more.
And to know seasonally. I mean,
because we actually, truth be told, didn't know those pecans were there until this year, but we've been walking that property for almost 3 years now. So they were there. We just didn't notice them.
I mean, the only reason is because I spent so much time out there and I was out there bush hogging again, and that's how I stumbled upon it. And, essentially walking or driving a bush hog, every square inch of that property over and over, you start to learn where things are.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that a piece of the foraging for me is the seed saving. And right now is really a great time to start doing that and start noticing. You really don't want to forage too much before now unless you're just seeing things fully ripen and they're ready. But right now is, the fruits are ripe.
Now is like late October.
Right. Now is late October. In our area, in our zone right now, things are really fully ripe. Flowers are fully ripe. Fruits are fully ripe, and that's what you really want to make sure that they're not green. If they're green, they're not going to probably fruit for you next year. They're not going to grow. So, but foraging for seeds is a really fun activity and something like low impact. You can start doing that and you can keep seeds in a really compact area. You don't have to you don't have to dehydrate them generally unless they're in the tomato still or whatever. But yeah, so seed hunting is a form of foraging, and it's a really fun thing to get into. Start this year. Just grab a handful of something, bring it home, and then try to grow it next year. And it's like magic. It's like carrying one summer into the next. And I don't know, there's something really beautiful about that process. Anyway, this conversation, hopefully you enjoyed. It turned out a little different than I expected it to. We went a little meandering, but we were open and willing. So hopefully it's meaningful for those of you listening. And if it was, please share. If you have thoughts about foraging, what did you forage this year? Share with us. Teach us something. You can email us. You can reach out on social. And we look forward to that. We love hearing your questions or your comments or your wisdom. And Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.